Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL Podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly.
Well, welcome back to the DCL Podcast, your podcast to cruise a little smarter. I am your host, Lake, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Christy. Christy, how are we today?
Hi, I'm well. How are you? I almost called you Steve.
I caught that.
Oh my God. So there you go. That's how I am today. I don't even know who I'm talking to.
We are actually seeing Steve today, so there is some reason for the confusion. But we have a fun episode to talk about today. We are not diving into any cruise specifically, but we are going to get to talk about all of the ships in the Disney Cruise Line fleet. And we're going to give you a little bit of information to hopefully help you cruise a little smarter and pick the best cabin for you and your family.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Me too. But we had to bring in one of our experts to help us with this because, quite frankly, I have the list of all the categories here, and I'm sitting here like, well, what's the difference between these categories with the same exact name, except for maybe what deck they're on? So to help us out today, we would like to welcome back to the show, Shannon. Shannon, how are you today?
Hi, I'm doing pretty good. I don't think I've ever been called a Disney cruise expert. Disney World, yes, but not Disney cruise. But I guess in this topic, I am.
Well, Shannon is going to help us today. Shannon, how did you get so well versed in Disney Cruise Line, and Disney Cruise Line staterooms?
So I'll kind of go back and how it started. So I am a DVC, a Disney Vacation Club owner, and I have a YouTube channel. And I decided to create a series about how to pick your best room at a Disney Vacation Club resort because I had had some good experience and some bad experience. So I started creating that series, and then I got requests to create the same video for Disney rooms at the hotel. So I created videos for every resort. And then the idea came to me that I should start creating it for the Disney Cruise Line. And that's how I started because I've been cruising. I've only done 6 cruises on Disney Cruise Line, but I've cruised quite a bit on Royal Caribbean and a couple other lines. But I am meticulous when I am picking my cabin. Now that we have a family and we're trying to be more budget friendly, we do a lot of guarantees. But I also, before I would really research the stateroom. So that's how I started. And when I went on our first cruise on the Disney Magic was when I really started researching the different room categories and which are the different staterooms, et cetera. And that's how this series came about.
You can find Shannon's YouTube channel by going to Shannon Ford, and you can add yourself to the list of the 26,500 subscribers that she has. But you'll see, it's amazing. She goes through, she does really good trip reports that I like, vlogs, and then she also does a lot of the best and worst videos, which these are really good.
Yeah, so the series is called Best and Worst Cruise Staterooms. The series for Disney, I think it's called Disney Best and Worst Disney Cruise Hotel Rooms. So there's different series, and then for the cruise, you'll have Disney Cruise Line and Royal Caribbean. And what I do is, even though the Magic and the Wonder are very similar, I do have separate videos for each because I think people just want to see their ship that they are sailing on. So I have not created one for the Treasure yet, but that is coming. These videos do take a lot of work and they are pretty time consuming. And I'm also waiting for a little bit more information to come out before I record that video.
Any video involving very specific rooms on a cruise ship is very difficult and very time consuming to both film and produce.
And you tend to repeat yourself. So you always have a comment like you repeat yourself too much. So I do comment in the video, in the beginning of the video, that you don't have to watch the whole video. Because sometimes, especially when you get to the icon on Royal Caribbean, I had to split it up into 2 videos. The ship is just too big. And it's not meant to be watched in its entirety. Because if you're staying in the Royal Suite, you're not watching the staterooms on the interior stateroom. So it's really meant to kind of look at the few categories you might be interested in and looking at those. So I do tend to repeat myself because some of the information might be, it's the same in each category, but I'm assuming that you didn't watch every single category. but I guess some people do.
All right. Well, turning this toward Disney Cruise Line, before we get into any ship specifically, let's talk a little bit about these categories. Now, Disney Cruise Line categories, their rooms, basically 1A all the way down to 11C. And not every category has an A, B, and C. Some just have an A, and then some go 4A, 4B, 4C. There is an inverse relationship between the number of the category and essentially what deck you are on, where the lower number are essentially the highest class of rooms, with 1A being concierge royal suites, going all the way down to 11C being standard inside staterooms. And of course, those categories also do not necessarily correlate with a specific deck or a location on the ship. But as you move up in categories, you do tend to move to a higher level of ship.
I would say that what I've noticed is that, for example, a deluxe veranda, 5A, 5B, 5C, the 5A will tend to be higher and more central, so more midship, whereas the 5C will be maybe lower and more forward or more towards the aft. So you can save a little bit of money depending on the category if you go to a 5C, but you're still getting the same type of room. You just may have to walk a little bit more.
And then a couple kind of ping words within these categories. We have standard, which is only used to categorize some of the inside rooms, which is basically a standard cabin style, meaning you do not have a split bathroom. And then most of the other categories moving up are deluxe ocean view or deluxe veranda. These mean you have the split bathroom. And then you move into deluxe family, which means you have some sort of extended space in the cabin, whether that space includes a trundle bed or some sort of pull-out seating arrangement. You typically have a little bit of extra space, but it does not always correlate with an entire extra bed.
That also works for the extended balcony that are on deck 5 on the original 4 ships, at least. And so you're getting extra space, but that category, you're getting it on the balcony versus in the cabin.
And then categories 1 through 3 correspond to the concierge rooms, which are going to have a very different layout from all of the other categories. And Christy will have to be our advisor on those categories.
Yes, I have not sailed in any of those as well.
Well, why don't we start with the classics, the ships with the least amount of staterooms to talk about for sure. We don't necessarily need to go through every single category on these ships, but Shannon is going to share some of her recommendations, some of her kind of secret room hacks with us to help you guys kind of look through these different categories and pick what might be right for your family.
Okay. Well, first off, I think if you have children that are going to be using the Disney's Oceaneer Club or Lab, to me, if you are on the same deck as the Oceaneer Lab, it is just so much more convenient. I love just being on the same deck. And that was something we learned pretty quickly, especially after our second cruise. Our first cruise, our son was 1, we used the nursery, and we were on the same deck, but we didn't realize how convenient it was until we went on the second cruise, and my son pretty much lived in the Oceaneers Club and we were not on the same deck. And it wasn't an inconvenient, but it was just not as convenient as it could have been. So I think that's something that is really something that we learned as a family, if you have a child that's going to use the kids club quite a bit. And then ironically, on these original ships, there are 6 staterooms that are considered the secret porthole staterooms. They are classified as, I think, 10A, and Christy, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 10A, and they are essentially the deluxe interior, but they have a porthole. But the portholes have an obstruction. So there's something, and some are obstructed more than others, but you do get an outside view, and you do have the split bathroom, but you're paying the price of an interior stateroom. And we were very fortunate to get one of these in September. And they are 50, 20, 55, 20, and then it's to 20, 22, 24, and then on both sides. And ironically, my brother-in-law traveled. We told him we were going on the cruise. He booked a cruise on his own through somebody else, and he ended up at a secret porthole two doors down. So I think we were in 55, 20. and they were in 5524. The 5020 and 5520 do have the least amount of obstruction as far as the porthole window, but they're all pretty much the same setup. And then I think 22 and 24 are conjoining staterooms as well.
Yeah, they connect.
Yeah. So that was a really great deal. And it was a 3-night cruise on the Magic, very convenient. It was on the same deck as the Oceaneers Lab and Club. It was just a great stateroom overall. You know, this was our first time technically in an interior stateroom with our son. Usually we travel in a veranda or a balcony. And we thought it was very comfortable, especially for a 3-night or a 4-night. I think it was perfectly fine. And my brother-in-law has twin boys, and they were perfectly comfortable too.
Oh, that's great.
So, and then there's also a couple other unique staterooms on the aft portion of the ship on the same deck. So if you go down to the aft category 6A, there's, I think it's the 5150 and 5650 have a little bit of like a larger balcony. So, and it's a unique shape. So it is, I think, a white wall balcony, but you are going to get a little bit of a larger balcony if that's important to you and your family. If you spend a lot of time out there, especially if you have an infant that maybe you go to the balcony to escape when they're taking a nap, it's nice to have that little extra balcony space. So that's very convenient as well. Now you are all the way on the aft, but you will get that little extra space on the balcony if, you know, when you need it.
Very cool. Well, what do we have when we are moving higher onto the ship?
So when you move up, you'll still see on the same level, 6A on the aft of the ship. Now there's two very unique staterooms. We were in a guarantee the first time we went on the Magic, which was in February of 2020, which is ironic that we actually sailed in 2020, but we got assigned 6654, which when I first saw that it was a handicapped accessible, I was very disappointed because my son was only 4. He didn't like showers, and it was a handicapped accessible, which means you didn't get the split bathroom. And then you also didn't get a bathtub, which is one of the perks of cruising on Disney Cruise Line. So I was actually disappointed that we were assigned that. Then I saw the room, and I got a tour, and I saw some pictures online of the room, and I saw that the room was extra large. It had a huge balcony, and it actually had an extra room of kind of just storage on the side. I do have a room tour of this room on my channel, and you know, you can't book it outright unless you need it because it is handicapped accessible. I'm kind of shocked we got assigned this stateroom, but we did, and it was very nice to have that, especially with a 4-year-old. But, you know, the balcony size, we're not balcony people, so the balcony was a little lost, but the balcony was probably double the size of our stateroom. It was that big. But then right next to it, there's 6152 and 6652. And the same thing, you've got a balcony that is larger. So you've got some unique balconies back there. So if you don't need a handicapped accessible, there are some. I did forget to mention that I do use the website cruisedeckplans.com. So that's the website that I use. And it is, to look at their pictures and videos, you do need to be a member. However, you will see if there's a little YouTube symbol. That means there's a tour on YouTube. So you don't necessarily need to be a member. If there's a YouTube symbol, you just need to look it up and find it on YouTube too. So there's a little cheat there that you can do. But that's the website I've used. I'm a lifetime member because I use the site so much. And then also in the forward part of the ship, there's, again, some handicapped accessible staterooms that are, I believe, ocean view, that are, again, a little bit larger. But you'll get that with the handicapped accessible. They tend to be larger and larger for a reason.
Before we move on from this category, if you had a baby or a child that was still in a pack and play, could you put the pack and play in that little storage room?
I think you could have. I wouldn't have closed the door because I'm not sure if it had like air circulation, but you absolutely could have. We thought about putting our son in there, you know, kind of on a mattress, but he didn't have problems sleeping. So he slept great on the couch. But we had thought about that, but then we ended up using it for all our storage and all our suitcases, which was it was amazing. That to me was the best part, was having that extra room, because you just didn't have anything that you were done with. We put our son's toys in there because we did bring a lot of toys. That was a longer trip. That was a 5-night, and that was a Marvel Day at Sea. So he had a lot of his costumes. So as soon as he wore his costumes, I just threw it in the closet.
So while we're kind of on this midship level, we do have some what I would call very dreamy veranda rooms that we know as navigator verandas. A lot of times these end up getting sold as guaranteed rates because they are less desirable than a regular veranda, but they're honestly super cute with their designing and theming that they do.
Yeah, they have like a map on the Magic and the Wonder. There's like a map on the side wall. And, the way I always word to my clients the regular veranda versus something else, I just call it a full veranda, which, I mean, the size isn't necessarily any different. But so that's how I would look at like the glass with the glass wall veranda versus the Navigator is going to have a little bit of a white wall. It's lower white wall, but it's still a white wall. And then it's closed in and it literally makes it look like you are looking out of a Navigator's window, if that makes sense. So it's like a porthole, circular, but it's open and with free air flowing. So yeah, those are always going to be a less expensive category choice, but still allowing you to have access to a veranda.
Yeah, and these are cool because they're actually there completely aesthetically, because when you look at the ship and you see the different circle portholes on the upper decks, there's a certain point where those turn into the Navigator verandas, and they're basically just there for looks to make the ship look a little bit sleeker and a little bit nicer.
And also, I think if you have a young child and you're nervous about a balcony, to me, that those Navigators, now I personally have never sailed on one, but the category when we were in the handicapped accessible one did have that white wall, and it just felt a little safer. Maybe it's just a comfort thing, but it just felt a little safer to have that white wall.
Yeah, and as Christy mentioned, they are cool. They also have, I believe, little like barometers and stuff in there, like little navigation-esque equipment down on the lower sections to kind of help entertain people.
Yes, the bench. I've seen the bench.
There's a little bench to the side. Before we leave maybe these different veranda types, I do want to talk briefly about the 6A in the category of a less expensive veranda category. Shannon mentioned those earlier in that some of them on deck 6 or the very aft of the ship have a little bit larger of a veranda, but you also have to watch out because the ones just behind the Navigator veranda on deck 5, for example, on the Magic and the Wonder, have the tiniest veranda that ever could be. Like we couldn't even put the chair. We were on one as a guaranteed room once, and we couldn't even put the chair like facing forward on the veranda. It had to be sideways because there literally wasn't enough room that you could put a body. So if you are on deck 5, and you can even tell in the map, it looks like on the deck plan that it's a little bit smaller of a balcony. But if you were on deck 5 in those like 51, 42, or 44, and then on the other side, the 56, 42, and 44, those are small. Just keep that in mind. And if you're saving a ton of money on your cruise, then it's fine, which is the way we looked at it. But, just something to keep in mind if you're literally picking that cabin.
And actually, that just reminds me that I do have a video about booking guarantees. So I have 2 videos, one on booking a guarantee on Royal Caribbean and booking a guarantee on Disney, and the pros and cons of that. And that's one of the cons, is that you could get a balcony. You might be booked on a balcony, but you might get the teeniest, tiniest balcony. Or in our case, you might get this balcony that's 2 or 3 times the size of your stateroom, but it's a handicapped accessible and you don't get the split bathroom or a bathtub. So there are downsides. Now that ended up being a huge positive for us. And we we brought an inflatable bathtub for our son. And we were like, you know what, you're gonna figure out how to shower. But it was worth it for us. But for some families, that might be, a challenge.
For sure.
All right, Shannon, any other cool rooms or hacks while we're kind of in this veranda category on the Magic and Wonder?
So the Magic doesn't have that many. I mean, there are some, again, just like she stated, there are some handicapped accessible again. Most of the larger, like really large balconies do tend to be handicapped accessible. What I did find interesting on the Magic is that the handicapped accessible were all the way on the aft. That has since changed, I've seen, with the Wish category and the Wish or the Triton class. Because I think if you were handicapped accessible to be all the way on the aft, that's a long trek to the closest elevator. So I know that there are some on the aft, but that's definitely something that's changed with the newer ships. But 7134 and 7634 again have a little bit of a larger balcony. They are that 6A class, so they have the white wall as well. Even though they're not veranda, they do have a white wall, but their balcony is a little bit larger. But you are in the aft. You're going to have to walk, but it's sometimes for some people it's going to be worth it.
Well, then that leaves us with one more section of rooms to talk about on the Magic and Wonder ships. That is Christy's favorite category here, the concierge rooms, which are categories 1A, 2A, 2B, and 3A.
The only thing I would say about this category is if you are traveling as a family and you have more than 2 people in your cabin, the 1-bedroom 2A category, those are going to be midship, and the midship 1-bedroom concierge cabins have the pull-down bed, the trundle bed, in the middle of the living room versus the 2B, which are more aft 1-bedrooms. The third bed is in the bedroom. So if you're traveling with kid, like for us, we loved the idea of him being in the living room and having his space to sleep there versus our space in the bedroom. And so those are going to be 80-32, 34, and then 85, 34, and 32 on the other side of the ship. The other thing to note is that the concierge lounge is midship. So the closer you are to midship, because you're going to be popping up to the lounge, does make it more convenient. And those rooms cost more, but to me, it's worth it, especially if you are using the third bed or you just want the closest journey to get to the lounge.
Well, anything else on the Magic and the Wonder?
My only other comment maybe about rooms is that all the family verandas are on the 8th deck, and those are below the pool deck, and you will hear some of the noise from the pool deck, like chairs moving or things like that. But if you want a veranda and you need a cabin that sleeps 5 or you need a larger cabin, I mean, that's just where those rooms are located, unfortunately.
I love that those ships are so small that the 8th deck is right below the pool deck. It's like 2 down to get to the fun, 1 up to get to the fun. It's not 7 down, 4 up.
No, for real. It definitely makes taking the stairs an easier journey.
But talking about larger ships here, let's move into the Dream and the Fantasy class. Shannon, what do you have for us starting down low?
So I would say the special staterooms here are also not a veranda stateroom. And this was the stateroom that I booked for my son's first birthday, and it was fantastic. It was our first time on a Disney cruise, and it is in category 8A again, and it is on deck 5. And again, ironically, on the same deck as the nursery and the Oceaneers Club. And it is the 50-18 to 50-22, yes. So 18, 20, 22, and then 55-18, 20, and 22. So these are ocean view. They have a large porthole. However, and especially I prefer the 22s and then 20 and then 18. So I think I think we were in 50-22 when we sailed. This was before I had my YouTube channel. But it's almost like a 1-bedroom, and it has a split. So you have this wall between the living room and the bed, and then you have these 2 large portholes. And my son was 1. He wasn't walking at the time, but he just loved climbing on that wall and climbing on the window and looking. I have a great picture of me and him relaxing, watching, sitting in the porthole watching. But it was great because we put his pack and play in that living room area. So he slept there. So we had this we didn't have a balcony to get away, but we actually had a whole separate bedroom. And it was just fantastic. We were able to have him take naps there if we didn't have him in the nursery, because we did utilize that nursery. And that's when we really fell in love with Disney Cruise Line. But it was great to have that extra space, especially when he did go to bed at night, where we could still watch TV or, just chill and just relax because we had that extra space. And now those rooms go quick. So a note about the bathrooms for these staterooms, they do not have a split bathroom. And then 50-18 has a handicapped accessible type bathroom. So there's no regular, it's like the shower that's kind of has the curtain. And then 55-18, the same thing, but that's a regular size bathroom, but with no bathtub. So the 18s are the ones that I I think are great for the extra space, but just know you're not going to get a bathtub in either of those. And then if you have, more than, one child and you need the split bathroom, then maybe the extra space won't be worth it, because you will not get the split bathroom with 50-20, 55-20, 50-22, and 55-22, but you will get the bathtub.
Very cool. Well, moving up towards our veranda rooms, what do you have for us?
So I think, and Christy, you're probably more knowledgeable of these, but I know that I think it's 50, it's the ones on the deck 5 that you can almost see another person. And I'm trying to, I think it's 50-24, family 50-26 or 55-26 can actually look into your balcony. And then 50-26 though is actually a huge balcony. So you've got this really nice corner balcony, but you can also look into your neighbor's balcony.
So the one thing to note for all the 4Es is that everybody from above can see in. So those are going to be basically the regular verandas or the deluxe family ocean view veranda that's on deck 5. So those are where the veranda is larger, but the room is not. But the way the ship is designed, the upper floors can see down into them. And because of the way they're set up, if you're in them and out, more than likely they can see in. Right. Unless you're standing right under the door.
But it's also a great balcony if you are someone who likes to get sun on your balcony, because that's really where you're going to get sun, certain times of the day. Or if you don't like sun on your balcony, then don't get those.
Yeah, keep that in mind as well.
Are those verandas loud though? So we stayed in extended on the Bliss, and anytime there was wind, it was all right into that, and it was almost unbearably loud and obnoxious.
I've been in one of those once, and I don't ever recall it being an issue like that where it was loud. But something to keep in mind, if you ever do a guarantee family veranda and it starts at category 4E, because typically when you do a guarantee, you can see which category you're booking into. So a lot of times for the Wonder and the Magic, they'll have a deck 7A. So you're literally starting, or a 6A. So you're starting at that bottom category and moving up, and they can put you anywhere within it. So for the family verandas, they can start you at 4E and then they can put you anywhere. So you might think you're getting a bigger cabin, for cabin space, but it's again, just the size of the room as a whole. And that category has the space outside.
Yeah, and I'll also note, so you'll see if you're looking at the deck plan, you'll see 55-52 is a handicapped accessible, but 50-52 is not. However, it has the room is a regular size balcony stateroom. However, the balcony is huge because it pretty much is the same size balcony as 55-52 that has a handicapped accessible. So it's extra long. So the balcony actually goes longer than the room. So you've got this it's probably 3 times the size of one of those other staterooms. So, and it's honestly a great location because for me, I love being next to the elevators or the stairs, and that you're going to get this extra large balcony and be very close to the elevators and stairs. So to me, that would be a great location. Some people don't like to be near the elevators or stairs because they're afraid of noise. I've never had an issue with that, but for us, that would be a perfect stateroom as well.
But on the flip side, in that same category, after the ship, 56-50 and 51-50. So those rooms butt up to the Oceaneer Club, and oh my God, they were so loud. We were in that, and you get all of the cleaning. So you get the kids making noise and being kids and doing the things. But then the kids go to bed, and the people who are cleaning the cabins or the Oceaneer Club come to work. Wow. And they like music as well. And they do things at 2 and 3 in the morning.
Yeah, because it closes at midnight.
Exactly. So they have to clean it. And it was very loud and very bangy and musicy and just loud for several nights of that cruise. So, and we sleep with noise machines on, like a white noise type. And it still was able to come through all that. So.
And those balconies are extra large too, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. that whole
But I don't, to me, that's not a good trade-off to have an extra large balcony with the noise. No, I'd rather have no balcony than that. And then again, there's some in the back. So with the aft, you want to be careful, kind of the same thing that I think Christy mentioned with the magic category, is that there are some that might have small balconies. So I think there's some navigators on the actual aft, and those can be pretty small as well. They're not a regular.
There
navigator.
is the navigator veranda, but then there's the 6A category still. And then there's another one too, 6B, that is still a white wall and is considered a smaller veranda.
Right.
But cheaper. So you get airflow and a visual to the ocean for less money. So it just depends on what works. But between the two, I would pick the navigator veranda over the other category, frankly, myself, if I needed to save money. All right.
Well, what would your recommendations be for someone looking to stay a little bit higher on the ship in one of our not concierge classes, but deluxe family rooms?
So you mean the verandas, correct?
Yes.
So I think verandas, for me, I don't remember there being any special staterooms. So for me, it's trying to get close to one of the elevators or one of the stairwells, especially, if I can get on deck 5, that would be convenient because again, I like being on the same deck as I like being on the same deck as Oceaneers Club, but also it's just very convenient. But deck 6 is also convenient as well. So you just have to go walk down one. So I personally, if one of those special staterooms isn't available, then I'm looking for location. Our family tends to prefer being near the aft. I just think that's just where we tend to spend most of our time. Probably it's kind of where the food is. That's where we spend most of our time. But other than that, it's just, I'm looking at location. So I think that's where you have to figure out, what I always say is, where does your family going to spend a lot of time? Is it, I need a cup of coffee every morning and the room service or coffee is just not going to cut it. So I got to go find somewhere where I can get it. So I'm looking where can I get the best coffee on the ship and where's the room that's the closest to that coffee? That's kind of where I start from.
All right. And then moving into do you have something to add on that? The verandas, Christy? Go for it. You're muted.
If you're adults, either traveling alone or with others, sometimes being near the adult district is the better location for you. So then you would want to be forward. I don't prefer being under the pool deck. Again, I don't like to hear that noise of chairs being put down or put up or moving in the wind. Obviously, sometimes you don't have a choice, and some people prefer it. Some people only want to run up one flight of stairs to get to the pool deck. So it also just depends on what your family is looking for. But deck 9, for those that want to be closer to the pool decks, but don't want to have cabins above and below them, that's always good. And I guess I would just keep that in mind. And this will be the same for the Wish, is some people still just want a cabin above and below them. So always looking to see what else is around you, especially if maybe you're a light sleeper.
All right. And then moving into our highest classes on the Dream and Fantasy. Christy, what do you have for us?
So deck 11 and 12 forward are where your concierge cabins are located. The lounge is located on deck 12. I always prefer to be on deck 12 when I'm sailing concierge so that I can just, pop out of the room and right into the lounge. It's also useful if you have a child and they're old enough to now go to the lounge by themselves. Deck 11 has, and you're just going to have to look it up, but they have a different window, if you will, a different balcony situation. And this is going to be for all of the cabins that are on deck 11. So the advantage of deck 11 is that you have cabins above and below you, but because of the aesthetic of the ship, there's actually a window sort of opening for your veranda cabin. And I would just say, look that up. And sometimes it's just what's available and it's still worth it to have the concierge access. And again, some people want to be located closer to that adult cove pool if that's what they're looking for, or they want cabins above and below them. But it's just the veranda is different. It's got this like glass window. So now sort of your airflow is coming through the window. So those are basically my only notes about that.
Yeah. And then just one note on the Royal Suites. There are 2 of them available, but they have a really cool setup on these 2 ships where they basically wrap around the front of the ship. So you get you get the most space you're going to get of almost any stateroom on Disney. But then you also get the largest veranda space that you're going to get on basically any of the Disney ships as well.
Yeah, there's a hot tub on them. There's a whole bunch of outdoor seating. I have been in the middle cabin before, 12,000, and that one actually connects to both of those royal suites on the side. So if you had a family traveling together, you can actually also connect the 12,004 and then 5 on each side as well. So you could and they could all connect together. Could you imagine? We just need to win the lotto so that we can have that whole front section and just have quite the party room.
That'd be the cost of my house.
Oh, yes. We don't think about that because if we won the lotto, we don't mind.
True.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing, there is a bump out on this ship. So if you're in concierge, the more forward, so not the very front where the royal suite is, but the more forward cabins have a bump out. And so they do have a little bit larger of a balcony.
Yeah. Looks like you are looking at rooms 12,006 through 12,012 on the port side, and then 2506 and to 12,512. A lot of numbers here.
You can see it on the map though.
Yep. They do have the little bump out pretty clearly printed there. Well, that brings us into our last class. We have one ship currently sailing and one more ship getting ready to start setting sail this fall. This is the Triton class, which will include our Wish and soon to be the Treasure. We have obviously information on these rooms from the Wish, and we would probably assume a lot of the layout is going to be the same for the Treasure.
Yes. So I'll start with the room that I had seen. Now, the first time I sailed, actually, Christy, we were on the same sailing. It was the 3-night preview sailing before the inaugural. I had actually won it in a sweepstakes and very, very fortunate, but we were assigned. It was kind of like being in a guarantee. I had requested this room. We did not get assigned it, but it was rooms 6196 and 6696. These are considered 4E, so they're family verandas, so they're going to sleep up to 5. And it is essentially, I do have a tour of 6196, and it's not, unlike the Magic, it's not a handicapped accessible. So this one you can book outright. You probably, I think they sometimes make you have at least 4 people to book this stateroom, because I know sometimes when I've looked, this category is not available to me because we're only 3. But it is essentially a 1-bedroom, and it has the just huge veranda, kind of wraps around. But the best thing is that you have this really large living room space and a bedroom space as well. So it's really, really nice. I have a full room tour on my channel that I did post, and it's just great. And you can book that room flat out, but it's not that much of a secret. So it usually is booked pretty fast. It's one of those rooms that's booked pretty much when they're on the release date.
So one thing to note too, when you book online, sometimes some of these special rooms or rooms that accommodate additional people may not show available for you if you have less than that occupancy, because they are hoping to fill the entire occupancy of that room. But you can call, and typically they will accommodate you with your room request then.
And that's one of the perks of having a travel agent, because I did not know that, and the travel agent will be able to do that. And one thing about those 2 rooms is they also have 2 TVs. So you have a TV in that bedroom and then a TV in that living room, and it does have a trundle bed. So it just, again, if you have teenagers or, a child that watches Disney Junior and you don't want to spend your whole vacation watching Disney Junior, you will have your own TV as well. So that's a nice. Now the balcony is pretty short in the fact that you're not going to have a lot of space between the wall and the railing, but it does wrap around. And when you go to Castaway Cay, you're going to have amazing views of Castaway Cay anytime you're on the aft.
I never considered that.
All right. Well, moving higher in our categories, what are your room recommendations?
So I think, again, with the Wish, that's really the ones that I think are very unique. We were originally assigned 6616. There is, a room tour. It is just a regular veranda stateroom, but I realized I loved deck 6. Deck 5, which is where we normally where the kids club is. Now the kids club is on a lower deck, but being so close to deck 5 was very convenient because I literally would just walk out and walk down the stairs or take the elevator. And deck 5 is where there's it's the top of the grand hall. So you have a lot of access there. So it was just a very convenient location. And then I was very close to the Enchanted Sword Cafe, so where I got my coffee. So that was very convenient. But I just loved being on deck 6 and being on that aft elevator balcony. Now, remember with the Wish, there's only 2 elevator or staircases. The other 2 ships categories, you have 3. So when you are on the aft or all the way forward, you're going to have more of a walk. Now, for some people, that's probably not going to be, a problem. And I think if I ended up in that very large balcony, I wouldn't mind walking. But, sometimes if you're just in a regular stateroom, that walk can get a little, it can be a little cumbersome, especially if you have a young child and you're carrying them and they fall asleep and you're having to carry them to the room at night. That walk can get very long. So I loved being on deck 6. The last time we sailed, we were on deck 8, more forward, and we realized how much we liked deck 6 and being toward the aft. So that was one thing. One thing I also will mention is that on deck 2, so if you are traveling with little ones and maybe you're nervous about traveling, I know a lot of people get nervous about using the nurseries, especially if they've never sailed before, and maybe their child isn't at a regular daycare, so they're nervous about using the nurseries. The rooms on deck 2, so this is the deluxe ocean view stateroom, so no balcony, but ocean view. These are very, very close to the Oceaneers Club, and it's a Small World nursery. So they're very close to the aft elevator and staircase, but they're just very, very convenient. And it's also pretty quiet down there because there's nothing else around there. They're pretty separated it's a Small World nursery. So especially the ones like 2128 to 2140, those are going to be very, very convenient to that Small World nursery. So I think that if maybe you're nervous, that might be a good category to book because you just be so close. So that way, just sometimes as a parent, I know the first time we sailed, we'd never used a cruise ship nursery before. And being that close just gives you a little added comfort as well.
There's also inside cabins on that floor.
Yes.
And to note that on the Disney Wish, and the same will be true for the Treasure, I'm assuming, that all of the inside rooms are standard, which means there is not a split bath. And then, you know what? One thing we didn't talk about on the Fantasy and the Dream as well for the inside cabins, they do have the deluxe cabins have the magic porthole that could have a fish swimming through, and it's very cute. Like different stuff occurs in those, but that is not on the Wish and the Treasure as well.
Is that only the Dream and the Fantasy actually for magic portholes?
Yeah, I don't think it's on the Magic and the Wonder. Somebody will have to confirm that for us.
I believe it is only those, the Dream and the Fantasy, which is one of those categories I always think sounds cool to stay in, but when it realistically comes to booking something, I'm like, well, I want to actually see outside, or I want to actually sit outside.
My mom was in one of those ones, though, and it is quite fun when they come across the screen. And so it's just, something even for adults can have fun with it. One point to note, too, for the Deck 6 lovers or people that might want to book it is you do get some of that noise from below. And if you are noise sensitive, depending on where your room is located, it's something to keep in mind. Friend of the show, Steve from Tampa, was in one of the room categories above the edge. And he said it was so loud and it went so late of the tweens, just yelling and doing kid things, right? What they're supposed to do. But he would not choose to be in one of those cabins again. And then the Wish does have bump outs in the Treasure. So you can see those on a deck plan as well. While most of them are in the family veranda category, there are some bump outs in the regular veranda category. And those are typically at the beginning of the bump out, I guess. And those are nice. They are a larger balcony.
All right. Well, then, Christy, moving into your expertise, one thing that the Wish has different is they have many more categories of concierge rooms.
Yeah. So the 1A, which is going to be what they deem, right, which is the royal suite on the other ships, is actually the tower suite for concierge. And that one is so different. And we've talked about that room before, but it's sort of in the middle. It does not have a balcony. You mostly basically have to go outside in order to get to the concierge lounge. And it's lovely. It's 2 floors, but it's its own thing. And then the concierge lounge is split because there's a pool deck on this ship, but the lounge for the most part is on deck 12. So you'll just want to keep that in mind if you are looking to sail concierge. I still prefer to be on the floor with the lounge if possible. And the advantage of this ship is that if you are on deck 12, there are rooms above and below you. There is a secret category that it's almost like a 1-bedroom, but it's an ocean view on the Wish and the Treasure. It's going to be those forward categories, forward rooms on deck 11, 11504 and 11006. Our listener Diane was in one of those. They opened it up because it was near the sailing. So if you go to get a concierge room near the sailing, they will open up whatever room categories left. And so they had the handicap accessible, but the other side's room will basically do the same. It's like a 1-bedroom, huge window, separated room. So you have a living room with beds and an actual bedroom so that you can have separation from whoever you're traveling with, be it your kids or other adults, whoever it is, which is really nice to have that. And even if you're in those ocean view rooms in the front of the ship, the room is huge. So somebody was in one of those cabins during a cruise that I was in concierge, and they showed us the room. And it's because they're taking basically the space that would have a veranda and just making it a part of your room. And I guess other design reasons, that room is giant. And actually, that ocean view category costs more than the family veranda on the Wish and the Treasure, because maybe the front of that room is so big. And you can always go up to the outside concierge deck to have outside space. Then another note is there is actually the 1-story royal suite is all the way aft on the ship on deck 10. So if you are staying there, you do have to go all the way forward and then up a couple of flights to get to the lounge. So I guess that's just something to keep in mind. Convenient if you want to get to Marceline Market, I guess, but why, right? And then the other thing to note about the Wish and Treasure concierge is that their lounge has a full bar. Like you get cocktails and beer and wine and stuff in the other ships, but this one has a full bar. So literally they have a blender, they have all the things, they can make all the drinks, which is different than the other ships. They also have a galley. So they are making hot food specifically for the concierge guest, and they can handle allergy orders as well. And it is lovely. Let me just say, you can literally get hot food in there. And if some people are maybe not interested in the dinner shows that you can find on the Wish and the Treasure, so the Marvel and the Arendelle, you can actually get made to order hot food in the lounge, which is helpful for those people that want to avoid that area. So yeah, this lounge is a game changer, in my opinion, of concierge. The other lounges are fine and they're good, but this one is next level. The lounge is huge, and then the offerings are really nice.
They also just have a lot more concierge rooms, right, on these ships?
Yeah. So, and because of that, you are less likely to get a cabana at Castaway Cay. Whereas, people always say, sail concierge, you can get a cabana. That is not always a guarantee. And even on the other ships, they keep adding concierge cabins. And even when they weren't, there's still a lot more concierge cabins than there are cabanas. And because of Facebook groups and people telling everybody, send in your email at midnight and all the different tricks and stuff like that, they're just not as available. So years ago when I sailed, there was literally never a reason. There was never concern that I wouldn't get a cabana. But now that everybody sort of knows how to do it, they're just not as easily accessible.
All right. Well, before we bring it out, let's just have a little conversation about realistically, if we were going to be booking rooms today, what is our actual go-to? Now, we don't have to go to every ship, every room specifically, but, what are just some favorite categories that we're realistically booking? For Katie and I, we don't always need the family room because it is just Katie and I. Yes, the extra space is nice. We have been given them before, but Katie and I actually quite a few times are comfortable booking, guaranteed rates and just taking what we're given. I will say our two go-tos is typically just a standard veranda. We're not too picky about the floor or the location. I do love forward and higher generally, but again, a good rate will be out on that. The other thing I really love are, I believe it is the category 8As. Let me see here. 8Bs and 8Cs. Any of those big porthole rooms, with the regular ocean views. Yes, where you get this cool, it's like the porthole is a bench. And it's just like a super dreamy setup to open up that big porthole. These are pretty easy to find and typically book on the ship. You can also tell on the map they're going to usually be wedged in between the navigator veranda rooms when you look on the map. And there is a good amount of them because you do have them forward and aft. Like I said, I love forward and higher. So, anything in that like deck 8, deck 9, even deck 7 area with those is pretty sweet.
We had one of those ones when Blake was maybe 4 or 5, and he just loved sitting in there and playing his car, like putting his cars up and down the little bench. Oh my God, that was his favorite. The category I book the most is a 5C. So it's basically your regular standard veranda. So with the glass opening, usually more centrally located. And to me, that means nearer to the elevators. I also like to just have a shorter commute off of the elevator to get to my cabin. And so typically those are the cabins that I will book.
And well, I actually just realized that I did forget to mention that there are on the Dream and Fantasy, there's 9D, that there's 4 staterooms that are forward, that are ocean view staterooms that are also extra large. I think I mentioned the handicapped accessible on deck 6, but on deck 7 and 8, there's some like extra, they're kind of the corner, a lot of extra space. So first, what I do is I tend to book, what weekend can I go or what time frame can I go, and then what's leaving out of South Florida. We live in Broward County, so same port as Fort Lauderdale. Used to be out of Miami, but now Fort Lauderdale. So that's what I'm looking at. And then the first thing I do is, are any of the special staterooms available? Is it, whether it's the interior, any of the special staterooms? And if those are not, then I'm looking for aft veranda, near the elevator or staircase. So that's kind of where I go to. But first thing is, if it's a special stateroom, whether it's the secret porthole or one of the extra larger ones, that's just a ocean view, then that's what I'm going to book. Or if there's a Florida resident guarantee. And I did have, and that's what reminded me, is that we did have one of the 800, I think it was, we had 8006 booked. And then I think it was a 3-night Halloween cruise. We were paying $2,400, and then a Florida resident rate came out and it was $1,600. So we were saving $800 to go up to a veranda. And I struggled with it, but it was $800 over a 3-night cruise. So we booked it. We ended up, in a great veranda. It was just not the larger size, but we had a great location. But, so that will always, saving money will always take precedence, especially now that my son is older. When he was younger, space took precedence. But now that he's older, saving money takes precedence.
Yeah, and that's really what this discussion is about. There is, not one style fits all by any means. And it is certainly, if you do not get some of these secret extended rooms, it's for the most part not going to ruin your trip by any means. All of the just standard verandas, standard ocean views are still going to be great rooms. You're still, for the most part, going to get your split bathrooms, and you're going to have your standard layouts. And as we said, sometimes when you book those guaranteed rates for the price, that's where you're going to end up. It's just a good old standard room. And this conversation, yes, does give you some hacks to get a little bit extra space if that is something your family needs. But ultimately, it's about making the right choice for your family, but also understanding that there are a lot of different categories. A lot of these rooms are going to end up being very similar regardless of, what specific A, B, or C you're going to be in.
And I always say the worst cruise room on a ship is still better than being at home. So there you go.
This
Absolutely.
is very true. Well, Christy, anything else before we take it out here?
Well, we're going to ask Shannon where we can find her, but definitely watch her YouTube videos because they're really good, including she has one like things that she wished she had known before her first Disney cruise. And yeah, that's a really good video as well as the others, but like that one's a great one if you're a newer cruiser.
And I'm not a travel agent. I know a lot of people ask me if I'm a travel agent. I'm not a travel agent. I have been asked to be one. I really don't have a desire to. I probably should, just considering how much we travel. But I do actually. I don't have a Disney cruise booked, but I do have a placeholder, and it's with Christy. So, and Christy's a great resource. I'm also celiac, so she's a great resource. When I first was traveling, I was asking her, and she's made some tremendous recommendations on things to eat and things to request that might not be on the menu if you're gluten free. So I know you guys have a lot of episodes because I listened to them all before we sailed the first time, and that's I think how I met you.
Yeah.
Well, Shannon, thank you again for all of the great information. Where can our listeners find you if they want to look more into some DCL room hacks?
So my YouTube channel that I have most of my vlogs on are Shannon Ford. And what I find is people will type in Shannon Ford Disney, or if you're cruising Royal Caribbean, you can type in Royal Caribbean. There's another Shannon Ford that's a reality star. That is not me. So you can find me that way. And then I do have playlists for each of these. And then with my vlogs, I know Christy mentioned my vlogs. So my vlogs, I always say that I don't vlog to vlog. Like we don't travel to vlog. These vlogs are our vacations. So when I vlog, I really try to give a realistic depiction of what our vacation is, what you can expect on a vacation with your children, or, if you have one child that's 8 years old, this is our experience. So I really try and give a realistic expectation of what our experience is like. And that's why our vlogs are probably a little bit different than the typical Disney vlogger, because these are our vacations, we're not traveling just to vlog. So that's kind of my niche in regards to my channel. But that's where you can find me, just Shannon Ford. And then if you're interested in beauty content, I do have a beauty YouTube channel as well called Shannon Loves Makeup. And I do have some travel, like what do I travel with and products that I travel with. And that's over on Shannon Loves Makeup.
And then on Instagram, you are Mrs. Shannon Ford.
Mrs. Shannon Ford, all one word.
All right. Well, Shannon, thank you again so much for joining us. But that is going to do it for this episode of the DCL Podcast. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show. Once again, we want to thank Shannon for coming on and giving her expertise on picking your DCL cabin. You can follow Shannon at Shannon Ford on YouTube and Mrs. Shannon Ford on Instagram. If you're enjoying the show, we greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We'd also like to thank our Patreons who help make this show happen each and every week for us. You too can help support the show by joining our community by visiting patreon.com/DCL Podcast. Whether you're boarding a cruise, enjoying a trip to the parks, or adventuring outside of Disney, on behalf of myself, Christy, and Steve, we want to wish you smooth sailing and safe travels. And we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.
The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.